Story 1. The Man Who Went Overboard Without a Sound. People who have never worked the Bering Sea think the danger comes suddenly. A rogue wave, a storm, something dramatic. That's not how it usually happens. Most of the time, the sea kills you quietly. I was 28 when this happened. It was my 4th season crabbing out of Dutch Harbour, and by then I thought I understood the job. I knew the cold. I knew the exhaustion. I knew how fast things could go wrong. What I didn't know yet was how easily a person could disappear while standing right next to you. We were fishing a pileo crab in January, which meant 12-hour deck shifts stretched into 18 when the weather allowed it. Sleep came in pieces, 20 minutes here, 40 minutes there. Your body never fully shut down. You existed in a constant fog of diesel fumes, salt spray, and adrenaline. Our deck boss was a guy named Mark Henson. Mid-40s. Quiet. Solid. The kind of man who didn't waste words and didn't panic. He'd been crabbing longer than I'd been alive. Everyone trusted him instinctively. If Mark said a line was safe, you grabbed it. If Mark said back off, you moved. That night, the sea was ugly but manageable. 6-foot swells. Wind pushing ice spray across the deck faster than we could knock it off. Every surface was slick. You learned to move like the boat itself. Slow, deliberate, balanced. Mark was beside me near the rail, helping coil a line that had come back twisted. I remember thinking how quiet he was. Then I realized something else. He wasn't there anymore. There was no shout.
No curse. No splash.
No sudden movement. 1 second Mark's gloved hands were on the line. The next, there was only empty space. I remember blinking, genuinely thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. I turned, scanned the deck, expecting to see him crouch somewhere else. Nothing. I yelled his name. The engines kept roaring. The wind howled. Nobody heard me at first. When the captain finally cut power, the silence felt wrong, like the ocean itself was listening. We searched the deck first. That's protocol.
Men fall.
They get pinned. They get knocked unconscious. Mark wasn't anywhere. Then we searched the water. Spotlight swept across black waves broken by white ice caps. Nothing came up.
No bubbles. No debris. No floating gear.
A man in full rain gear should float, at least briefly. Mark never surfaced. After the Coast Guard arrived and the initial shock wore off, they reviewed the deck cameras. That's when things got worse. The footage showed Mark working beside me. Then, 1 frame later, he was gone.
No stumble. No sleep.
No backward motion toward the rail. Just absence. The Coast Guard officer replayed it 3 times. Then he stopped the video and stared at the screen longer than necessary. He didn't say anything. What the report said. The official report concluded. Man overboard due to weather conditions. That's the phrase they always use. But here's what still bothers me. The rail height was correct. No ice buildup where he stood. No loose lines near his feet. No camera evidence of a fall. Mark was careful. Methodical. He didn't rush. He didn't take risks. And he didn't make noise when he vanished. What it felt like after. We finished the trip. That's another thing people don't understand. The sea doesn't stop just because it takes someone. Every night after that, I stood at the same spot on deck, staring at the rail, imagining how easily I could be next. The ocean didn't feel violent. It felt patient, like it could reach up any time it wanted, and simply remove you. Why this still haunts me. Years later, another fisherman told me something quietly over coffee in Dutch Harbour. He said boats don't always lose people to accidents. Sometimes the noise, the exhaustion, the cold, they line up just right, and a man steps into the wrong moment. And the sea doesn't announce it. It just accepts him. Story 2. The frozen line that wouldn't let go. If you work crab long enough, you learn to fear the lines more than the sea. The ocean can throw you, drown you, freeze you, but the lines are worse. They don't move fast. They don't scream. They don't announce danger. They wait until you make one small mistake, then they take everything at once. This happened during my 6th season, late January, north of St. Paul Island. We were fishing in heavy icing conditions, the kind that turns a working deck into a solid sheet of glass in under an hour. Everyone was tired. That's important, because no one gets hurt when they are alert. They get hurt when they're exhausted. The setup. The temperature sat just below zero. Wind at 30 knots. Every wave sent freezing spray over the bow, coating the pots, rails, and lines in thick white armor. We were running pots non-stop to stay ahead of the weather. Knock ice. Set gear. Haul gear. Repeat. You stop feeling your hands after the first few hours. Your gloves become stiff, useless shapes. You rely on memory more than sensation. That's when the line froze. The crab line came up hard and wrong, twisted in the block, coated in ice so thick it looked like a frozen cable instead of rope. The deck boss yelled to slow the winch. The captain eased it back, but not enough. That's the thing about boats. Everything is a compromise between danger and productivity. Jonah was standing too close. Mid-30s. Strong. Quiet. He'd been on deck most of the night. He was good with lines, careful, experienced. He reached out instinctively. Not to grab, just to guide. That instinct nearly killed him. The frozen line slipped suddenly, snapping free of the block with stored tension that had nowhere to go. Jonah's glove caught a loop. Not wrapped. Not tied. Just enough. The winch didn't stop. The sound. I'll never forget the sound. It wasn't a snap. It was a deep tearing noise, like thick fabric being ripped underwater. Jonah was yanked forward so violently his feet left the deck. His shoulder dislocated instantly. You could see it, the arm hanging wrong, twisted at an angle arms don't go. He screamed once. Then again. Then he didn't stop. Chaos. Someone hit the emergency stop. Too late. The line slackened, dropping Jonah hard onto the deck. He didn't try to get up. His body went rigid, every muscle locked in shock. Blood soaked through his sleeve. But what scared us wasn't the blood. It was his face. His eyes were wide open, unfocused, mouth moving like he was trying to say something but couldn't form words. Pain like that breaks language. The injury. When we cut his gear away, we saw the damage. The shoulder was destroyed. Collarbone shattered. Ligaments torn clean through. Later, the medic told us something quietly. Jonah hadn't screamed just from fear or surprise. He screamed because the force had partially torn nerves away from the spinal column. Pain so intense the body doesn't know how to shut it off. The weight. We stabilized him as best we could. Morphine barely touched it. The Coast Guard cutter was hours away. Jonah kept apologizing. That's what stuck with me. Between gasps, between shaking, he kept saying, "I am sorry. I am sorry. I didn't mean to." Like the injury was a personal failure. Like he'd done something wrong by getting hurt. The cold sets in. As shock deepened, Jonah started shivering violently. Then the shivering stopped. That's when panic really hit. The medic told us to keep him awake, talking. We talked about anything. Fishing stories. Food. Anything to keep him present. At one point, Jonah looked at me and said something I still hear in my sleep. I didn't think it would grab that hard. Evacuation. When the helicopter finally arrived, the wind nearly took it sideways. We loaded Jonah carefully. As they lifted off, I noticed his hand was clenched into a fist so tight his knuckles were white. He never opened it. Aftermath. Jonah survived. Barely. He lost most use of his arm. Chronic nerve pain. Years of rehab. He never returned to fishing. A year later, I ran into him in Anchorage. He looked older, smaller, like something had been taken that couldn't be replaced. He told me he still dreamed about the line. Not the pain. The moment before it grabbed him. What stayed with me? Since that day, I watch lines differently. I don't trust them. I don't step close. I don't reach instinctively. Because lines don't forgive reflex. They don't care how experienced you are. They don't stop once they start. Why this is horror? People think horror needs monsters. But standing on an iced-over deck, listening to a man scream because a machine pulled part of his body apart, knowing it could have been you, that stays with you forever. The sea didn't take Jonah. The line did. And it almost took everything. Story 3. The Empty Wheelhouse. If there's one place on a crab boat where a man is supposed to be safe, it's the wheelhouse. It's warm. It's enclosed. It's controlled. When someone goes missing from the wheelhouse, the sea stops making sense. This happened during a winter opener, somewhere west of Dutch Harbor. I won't name the boat. Some of the men involved are still fishing, and some memories don't need to be dragged back into daylight. But what happened that night changed how I see boats forever. The captain. Our captain was named Ray Calder. Late 50s. Grey beard. Calm voice that never rose, even in bad weather. He ran a tight ship, strict about procedure, big on routine. Nothing moved on deck without him knowing about it. Ray didn't take unnecessary risks. That's important, because whatever happened to him wasn't the result of recklessness. The conditions. We were running through moderate seas. Nothing dramatic. Wind around 20 knots. Visibility poor but workable. The autopilot was engaged. Course steady. Pots stacked and secured. Ray stepped into the wheelhouse alone. I watched him go. He nodded at us through the window and shut the door behind him. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. 5 minutes. 5 minutes passed. Then the alarm sounded. Autopilot disengaged. The boat started to drift off course. That shouldn't have happened. Ray was meticulous about alarms. If autopilot failed, the backup should have kicked in. If he left the wheelhouse, he'd have told someone. We ran inside. The wheelhouse. It was empty. Not no one standing at the wheel. Empty. Empty. Radar on. Navigation lights on. Radio humming softly. Ray's coffee sat on the console, steam still rising. The chair was pushed in. The door was closed. That's when the first chill hit me, and it wasn't from the weather. Locked in. The wheelhouse door locks automatically when it closes. You need to turn the handle from the inside to open it. There was no alarm log showing the door opening. No camera footage of movement. Ray had not left that room. But he wasn't in it. The search. We shut down the boat and searched everywhere. Deck. Engine room. Crew quarters. Storage spaces. Nothing. No blood. No signs of struggle. No damaged equipment. We checked the water. Nothing surfaced. The Coast Guard arrived within hours. They ran thermal scans. Nothing. It was like Ray had evaporated. The theories. The official theory was simple. He stepped outside and fell overboard. But no one could explain how. The door opened without logging. No alarms triggered. No camera footage captured movement. No sound was heard. No splash was seen. The sea was rough enough that a man falling in would have made noise. No one heard a thing. The detail that still haunts me. During the investigation, one of the Coast Guard officers pointed something out quietly. The wheelhouse chair was positioned slightly away from the controls. Like Ray had stood up calmly. Not rushed. Not panicked. Like he intended to step somewhere. But where? What we found later. Weeks later, maintenance reviewed the ship's internal audio logs. There was one anomaly. At 2:41 a.m., a short sound recorded on the wheelhouse MIC. Not a crash. Not a shout. A soft exhale. Then silence. After that, the boat never felt right again. Men avoided the wheelhouse at night. No one liked being alone in it. I remember standing at the helm weeks later, hand on the wheel, listening to the hum of electronics, convinced for just a second that someone was standing right behind me. I never turned around. Why this story still follows me. People ask how a man can disappear from a sealed room on a moving ship. I don't have an answer. All I know is this. The sea didn't drag Ray away violently. It didn't announce itself. It didn't leave damage. It just removed him. And the boat kept going. Story 4. The deckhand who froze standing up. There's a point in extreme cold where pain stops being the problem. People who haven't experienced it think freezing to death is violent. Teeth chattering, limbs failing, dramatic collapse. That happens sometimes. But more often, hypothermia works quietly. It convinces you that everything is fine. That's what happened to Eli Porter. And that's why none of us realized he was dying until it was too late. The season. This was late February, near the end of a brutal winter season. Everyone was exhausted in that deep, bone-level way that sleep doesn't fix. You don't notice the cold anymore, not because it's gone, but because your body has stopped complaining. That's dangerous. We were hauling gear non-stop, pushing hard to finish strong before weather forced us back. Eli was young, early 20s, first season, strong and eager, but still learning how the cold lies to you. He never complained. That should have worried us. The shift. The night shift ran long. Wind steady. Spray constant. Ice building faster than we could clear it. Eli was assigned to knock ice near the rail. Monotonous, exhausting work. Swing the mallet. Step carefully. Repeat. I passed him several times. He nodded. Didn't speak. His movements were slow but steady. Nothing alarming. The moment we missed. At some point, Eli stopped swinging the mallet. None of us noticed. On a working deck, stillness blends into chaos. You assume someone's tying off a line, adjusting gear, catching their breath. No one expects a man to stop because his body has begun shutting down. Eli leaned against the rail, hands gripping metal, head slightly bowed. It looked normal. Dawn. We found him at first light. Still standing. Frozen solid. His gloves were fused to the rail by ice. His fingers locked in place. Eyes open. There was no sign of struggle. No collapse. He hadn't even fallen. What hypothermia does. The medic explained it later. Severe hypothermia can cause terminal burrowing and paradoxical calm. The body conserves energy by shutting down movement. Eli hadn't felt pain. He'd felt relief. That knowledge made it worse. The aftermath. We shut down operations. No one spoke. We covered him with a top, but it felt pointless. The cold had already claimed him completely. Later, when the coroner examined him, they confirmed. Time of death was hours earlier. We'd worked beside a dead man without knowing. Why this haunts me. I think about how close we were. How many times someone passed him. How no one thought to shake him, speak to him, Check. Because he looked fine. He was standing. He was working. That's the lie Cole tells. What I learned. Now, when someone goes quiet on deck, I don't assume they're focused. I assume they're in trouble. Because freezing doesn't always knock you down. Sometimes it lets you stand. And it waits. Story 5. Lost during a pot run. If you want to understand how people disappear at sea, you have to understand routine. Not storms. Not panic. Routine. Most men who go missing don't do anything dramatic. They don't shout. They don't fall during chaos. They vanish during moments so ordinary no one thinks to watch. That's how we lost Caleb Moore. The day everything felt normal. It was a calm day by Bering Sea standards. Low swell. Light wind. Good visibility. That's when you let your guard down. We were running a standard pot string. Nothing complicated. Same motions we'd done hundreds of times that season. Lift. Secure. Stack. Reset. Caleb had stepped away from the sorting table to check something near the stern. He said, "I'll be right back." That's the last thing he ever said. The gap. It couldn't have been more than a minute. I remember because the next pot came up crooked, and I looked around to see if Caleb was in position to help guide it. He wasn't there. At first, no one reacted. People step out of view all the time. But then another pot came up. Still no Caleb. Realization. The deck boss called his name. Nothing. We shut down operations within seconds. That's when the fear hit. Not sudden, but creeping. Caleb's gloves were still on the sorting table. His knife lay exactly where he'd set it. He hadn't planned to go far. The search. We searched the deck. Then the water. Spotlights swept the waves. Nothing. No splash heard.
No shout remembered.
No one had seen him fall. The sea was calm enough that a man going over would have been noticed. But no one noticed. The small detail. Later, reviewing the deck cameras, we saw something unsettling. Caleb stepped toward the stern. He paused, turned his head slightly, like he'd heard something. Then the footage cut out for 3 seconds. When it resumed, the deck was empty. No fall.
No struggle.
Just missing time. Official explanation. Man overboard during routine operations. That's what the report said. But here's the problem. Caleb was cautious. The rail was secure. Weather was mild. No line was under tension. There was no reason for him to go over. What we never forgot. The quiet after. Boats don't stop. Seasons don't pause. The work continued. But every time someone stepped away during a pot run after that, someone else watched them. Because routine is when the sea takes people. Not loudly. Not violently. But when no one's paying attention. Story 6. The storm they never outran. Every fisherman has a storm they think about when they hear the wind rise at night. Not the worst storm they survived, the one they didn't. This is that storm. The forecast we ignored. The weather report came in wrong. Not completely wrong, just optimistic enough to make us hesitate. Winds expected to build overnight. Seas rising. But nothing we hadn't worked through before. That's the trap. In the Bering Sea, storms don't start all at once. They creep in, tightening like a vice. We decided to finish one more string of pots before heading south. Just one more. The first signs. The barometer started falling faster than expected. Swells stacked closer together. The boat began to pitch instead of roll, a bad sign. Still, no one called it. We were already committed. That's the other trap. Once you're halfway through a decision, turning back feels worse than pushing forward. When the sea changed. The wind shifted. That's when everything felt different. Waves stopped coming from one direction. They came from everywhere. The deck became a moving slope. Pots slammed harder. Lines came up heavier. Then a wave hit us broadside. Not huge, just wrong. It knocked a pot loose. The injury. The pot slid fast. One of the crew, Aaron, didn't have time to move. The steel edge caught his leg, pinning him against the rail. Bones broke like wood. He screamed once. Then the next wave hit. We couldn't free him. The sea didn't give us time. Decision point. The captain had to choose. Cut the line and lose the gear, or risk the boat. He cut the line. The pot slid free. Aaron collapsed. Bleeding. Shaking. We were still hours from help. The realization. As we turned south, the storm closed in. Wind howled so loud you couldn't hear yourself think. Waves rose higher. The boat climbed one, slammed down the next. Aaron drifted in and out of consciousness. Then the generator failed. Then the lights went out. Darkness. Running blind in heavy seas is something I don't wish on anyone. The captain steered by instinct and memory. Water came over the bow. We started taking on ice faster than we could clear it. That's when someone said it out loud. We are not outrunning this. The end of hope. The storm owned us now. We didn't die that night. But 2 days later, Aaron did. In a hospital bed. From injuries that never should have happened. What stayed with me? We survived. But every time someone says, just one more string, I hear the wind rise in my head. Because storms don't care how close you are to being done. Story 7. The Last Season. No one ever plans their last season. You don't wake up one morning and decide that this will be the year the sea finally takes enough from you to make you walk away. It happens slowly, through a collection of moments that don't feel important at the time. A near miss. A sound you can't forget. A name that stops showing up on the dock. By the time you realize it's your last season, it's already been decided. The beginning of the end. This was my 10th year crabbing. By then, I knew every sound the boat made, which ones meant trouble and which ones were harmless. I could feel weather changes through the deck before the forecast ever came in. I'd stopped getting seasick years earlier. On paper, I was experienced. Inside, I was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. The sea hadn't scared me lately. That scared me. The quiet changes. I started noticing things that hadn't bothered me before. How quiet the deck felt after dark. How the horizon disappeared completely at night, leaving you suspended in blackness. How easily you could imagine stepping off the edge and never being found. Those thoughts come to everyone out there. What matters is how long they stay. The crew. That season, the crew was young. Strong. Loud. Confident. They laughed at things that used to make me nervous. I saw myself in them, and it didn't feel good. I started double-checking their work, watching their footing, counting heads more often than necessary. They thought I was being paranoid. Maybe I was. But paranoia keeps you alive longer than confidence. The incident. It happened during a routine reset. Nothing dramatic. A line came up wrong, twisted, under tension. I saw it before anyone else did. I shouted. Someone hesitated. The line snapped free. It missed his head by inches. Everyone laughed afterward. I didn't. I couldn't stop seeing how close it had been. The night watch. Later that night, I took the watch alone. The sea was calm. Too calm. Stars overhead.
No mon.
The boat cut a narrow path through black water that reflected nothing. I thought about the men I'd known who never came back. Mark. Jonah. Ray.
Eli.
Caleb, Aaron. Names don't leave the water. They stay. The moment of clarity. Standing there, I realized something simple and terrifying. I wasn't afraid of dying anymore. I was afraid of becoming numb to it. That's when you get careless. That's when the sea wins. The decision. When we docked weeks later, I didn't tell anyone. I packed my gear slowly, folded my gloves, cleaned my boots. The captain asked if I'd be back next season. I told him I didn't know. I already did. Why I left. People think leaving the sea means it lost its power over you. They're wrong. I left because I respected it again. Because I understood that every season it lets you come back is a gift, not a guarantee. Some men stay until the sea decides for them. I didn't want that. What still haunts me? Even now, years later, I sometimes wake up at night expecting the deck to move beneath my feet. I listen for wind that isn't there. I remember faces that vanished without explanation. The sea doesn't roar in those memories. It whispers. Final truth. The real horror of Alaskan crab fishing isn't the storms. It isn't the injuries. It isn't even death. It's how easily the job teaches you that disappearing is normal, and how hard it is to remember that it shouldn't be.